Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for American Midwest Ballet's Dance Chat, where we gather some of the choreographers of our pieces from Going Solo, which was our fabulous year-long film exposition, exciting adventure. My words are getting away from me because I'm just so excited. We have here today on this Zoom some amazing choreographers and our resident filmmaker. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. We're going to jump right into it. We're going to talk about choreography. We're going to talk about film and filming dances, and we'll do it all in a very short hour. So my name is Hannah Clark. I'm a production and development associate for American Midwest Ballet, and I'm just so enthusiastic about the amazing work these people do. And I will let Lance introduce himself next.
Oh, thanks, Hannah. I'm Lance Glenn. I was the cinematographer and editor on all of the Going Solo films. So it was a busy season for me.
Yes, a lot of creations. Frank?
I'm Frank Chaves, and I'm the choreographer for If Only.
And currently in Florida, right?
Oh, and currently just a new transplant down in Florida, Sarasota, Florida.
We're all jealous. Sandra?
My name is Sandra Solis, and I'm the choreographer for Pearl, which is based on the Vermeer painting, and I am presently in Central Texas.
Warm. And Erika?
Hi, I'm Erika Overturff. I'm the artistic director of American Midwest Ballet, and I'm just really happy to have these choreographers joining us today, but also, you know, that they stepped up and joined us during this very different year to create beautiful new works and share their talents with our dancers and also just our whole A&B community.
Yes, thank you guys so much. And Erika, you also choreographed many of the Going Solo pieces, but specifically the Bee's Knees, right?
Yes, I did. That one came about through, Jocelyn Art Museum has been such a fantastic collaborator all throughout our history. And so they contacted me and said that it was their 90th anniversary coming up and that they had an exhibition around the kind of 20s era type of stuff. And I said, well, that's perfect for a dance. I could do something with that. So I decided to choreograph the Bee's Knees, and I was able to use 4 dancers instead of the typical 1 dancer that was featured in most of our solo works, because these 4 dancers were roommates. And so they were kind of quarantined together and taking class together, training throughout the process. So I think it was really fun for them to get to have kind of a culmination of that year to make a piece together. So that's what we did.
Absolutely. And you touch upon one of the fun themes that has brought us all together today, which is that all of the pieces we're talking about were going solo, but not so solo. All of the pieces featured more than one dancer. In the case of yours, Sandra, it was the unborn child of one of the dancers, Amaris. Do you want to talk a little bit about your piece?
Sure. So I've known Amaris for a long time. She danced in my company here in Houston, and I always felt like she had this striking resemblance to that Vermeer painting. And I thought, here's an opportunity to take advantage of that. And the fact that she was 8 months pregnant, I thought, well, maybe that was the secret of that girl, because we only see her from the backside. So we just went with that, and we continued to work. And it was, this Zoom process. So I wasn't even in the room with her. So I was working in a studio up in Dripping Springs, and she, of course, was on the stage, I think, with a big monitor in front of her. And so I would kind of show the movement, and then she would do it. And because she's kind of familiar with my movement vocabulary, having worked with my company, it came along pretty well. And of course, the thing that was most striking about it was the costuming, that Erika and her mother pulled off some magic there and found just the right thing that really looked like and also then a way to shield the big reveal until the end. So that was key to making that kind of all work. And I asked that the introduction to the piece be afterwards, so people wouldn't know up front that was what was going on. But I like to look at a painting like that and say, well, who was that person, and who's behind that person? Why couldn't she have been? Because it wasn't a big, it was a big deal to paint somebody while they were pregnant, I think, at that time. But Vermeer had been known for actually doing that. So anyway, that was kind of pleasing.
Fantastic. Yeah, it translated so well as such a surprise. And I love that you say about who was this person? And dance is amazing because when you see someone dancing, you don't know who is this person. And they usually don't speak and you see them only through their movements. And that brings us to your piece, Frank. You were also able to film multiple people dancing because they were a married couple.
Yeah.
So we've got all the varieties of quarantined together. So would you talk a little bit about how your piece came about?
Sure. Well, first of all, I was ecstatic that Erika called me. You know, like this is literally in the middle of lockdown. I think it was, or not in the middle of, kind of like 3/4 of the way into it. And she said, "Hey, we have this project going on." And I had worked with Isaac because I had just previously set one of my pieces, Habaneras, the music of Cuba, on the company. And Isaac was in it, and his wife was an understudy, I believe, if I remember correctly, right? And so when she asked me, she knew how much I loved partnering, and I said absolutely, I would love to do it. And it was really a very unique and kind of special. I'm honestly getting chills as I think about it when I remember back to that time in our lives and in our history where I was in my bedroom on a computer on Zoom and they were in a studio. And while Isaac, you know, they worked on an existing piece of choreography, they'd never worked with me and I hadn't worked with them on anything new. So, and I'm in a wheelchair. So I'm paraplegic for those that can't tell because I am in a wheelchair permanently. And so it was really quite the collaborative process. And it took us a little while to get going. And also based on the theme I was using is really kind of now the third, and what is sort of a trilogy as far as this theme goes, which is about human touch and connectivity and what it's like to have human touch in your life, but also what it's like to not have it and how detrimental that could be. So I created a men's piece in 2014 for my company, River North Dance Chicago. And the third duet, it was about the loss of affection between men, how it deteriorates the older you get. And in the third duet, there was this constant reaching and kind of dodging of human touch in this one particular one. So they never ever connected. And then that became the springboard for a piece I did for another company called Silently Screaming. And that was for Williams Henry Contemporary Dance Company in Kansas City. And so then I did another duet that was similar and again, the same theme. And so then I thought, I'm not done with this. And what a perfect time. And so their duet actually started with this idea of reaching and not touching and being like imagine being without touch in your life from another human being for 10 years and all of a sudden someone goes to touch you. You may refuse it or you may be unsure. It's been so long. So we kind of started there. Mm-hmm. And I knew that eventually I wanted them to connect. And again, my love of partnering, that was going to happen. So it was really fun to explore that with them. And, you know, I'm not sure about Sarah, but Sandra, sorry, we rehearsed like every Saturday for a couple hours initially. So it wasn't like a regular rehearsal period where it's condensed and you got to get it done and you have a time to get on stage. And there was something also really enjoyable about that. I was like, Erika, do I have a deadline? You know, and she's like, well, you know, for now it's still open. So we got to spend a lot of time developing it. And little by little, we really found our groove. And I always tell dancers that I work with in this situation that to not worry, you can't be worried about making a mistake or doing something that I don't want, because I can do some port de bras, but other than that, I can't do much else. So it really has to come from them. So in that respect, it was, I got to know them really well. And that was a really lovely experience that we're not often afforded that kind of time.
Wow. Yeah, that was beautiful, Frank. And you touched on this aspect I wanted to kind of delve deeper into about choreographing on Zoom. So you guys create dances, but you're creating them on specific dancers and the variety of dancers that you worked with as well. So you spoke a little bit about the challenges, right? You're not in the room. It's very difficult to demonstrate what they're supposed to do, but also some of those benefits, the extended relationship that there's when overcoming that effort, it makes a beautiful product. So Sandra and Erika, did you have anything about perhaps the challenges or even the benefits of rehearsing and choreographing on Zoom?
Well, Frank was saying he had this longer time window, which he enjoyed. Sandra did not. A baby's coming, that's going to come, and there's no stopping it. So she had to get that piece done, and we had to get it filmed, and we probably did that at the last possible moment that it could be done. I felt like.
Yeah, 8 weeks or months, excuse me.
And we started, I think we did it in a week. I started with her on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It was pretty much done Friday. We might have had a break or we had a run through, and then Saturday we filmed it and it was in the can. So
Bravo.
I kind of like working that fast. I mean, generally when I go someplace, I'll take a long weekend and it's maybe a 10, 12-minute ballet. And I just like hunker in and it's like, 6 hours one day, 6 hours another day, 3 on either end to cast it and then to perfect it. And then it's like, you're in, you're out. Now you come back to that later and think, oh, I wish I'd had more time to do this and this with it. But, I think the hardest thing for me with the Zoom was the musicality, because there's just that little bit of a lag. So sometimes when I saw the actual film, it was like, yeah, she's not hearing that because she's not hearing it at the same time I'm hearing it. So that was the only thing that was a little bit odd, but she did beautifully and finished it in a record amount of time, indeed. So that was I kind of like slam bam, thank you, ma'am. Because that's what I was used to, with a union company with Houston Ballet, and even with my own dance company, I bring in somebody. I mean, I had time to kind of develop work, but I'd had 3 or 4 works I was working on at the same time with the dance company. So it's like, okay, I have people for limited amounts of time, and kind of like Balanchine with Serenade. They fall down in rehearsal. That becomes part of the piece.
Right.
Now, I didn't want her to fall down.
Right.
And she did have one slip one day, and I was just like, oh my God, this is so dangerous. You realize it's like, remember, she's carrying another human life here. So,
wow. Well, that leads into a side of this question, which was the safety. So, these dance pieces, physically demanding, such high energy, especially for Erika and Frank's, that they were just like these sort of marathons. What advice do you have for choreographers? Maybe they're doing it virtually, to make sure that they can track a dancer's stamina or they keep it safe.
I think one of the things that was most difficult, in my situation, and perhaps with all of us, really, is that the dancers were not dancing, really, and a lot of them, like in my situation, they had to, he went off to and had a full-time job, and then was coming to show up in rehearsal and unable to take company class, any day of the week, or stay in shape, and then all of a sudden come in and do something that required, or what I was asking of them was quite a lot. And so that was, and you can tell, I think, through Zoom, even though you're not in the room, it's all about body language for the most part. You know, and you can see it. You can see when it starts to wane a little bit, or when they need a break, or and even the most difficult part for me was really not getting to be in the studio, not only for energy, but to see faces as close as you're used to seeing them. But again, as dancers and as choreographers, it is the body language, and the body language, you know, you can tell when somebody's starting to have a moment or need a moment, or they just need a break. Even if it's not about stamina, they just need to take a pause for a second. So
what is
I don't
dance
know.
if not body language, I suppose?
Yeah, I felt it was clear for me, and I did do a lot of partnering.
Yeah, you all are very experienced. So having that, I mean, it makes it's a blessing for the company, because experienced choreographers will ensure that dancers stay safe. So
Right.
Thank you for that. Absolutely. Erika and Sandra, anything you wanted to add to that before we move on?
Well, I think over Zoom, just like in the studio, just communication with the dancers is good. As dancers, we're sort of trained to not complain and have a very, you want to have a positive attitude and presence in the room, and, be ready for whatever, but you might be having a pain or needing, something. So it's good for whoever's in the front of the room to, realize that. So just to ask them, like, how are we doing today? How are our backs? What's going on with yours? Your ankle coming along, and stuff, just to giving them an opportunity where they're not worried that you think that they're slacking, but you can find out what's going on with them, and then, adapt things accordingly if need be for the rehearsal.
I think maybe Lance could comment on that too, because in the recording of Pearl, I think she did run through 3 times, and I might have loved to have done it one more time, but I could sense that she was tired. I mean, she's carrying another load, and so we just needed to. Well, we got what we got, and we can splice in parts, and that's it. We wanted to do a close up on some things, and so we just took those sections out to just do a little close up of that foot line or whatever it was going to be. So maybe Lance could also. He's filming it. He can also see when it's like, okay, we need to take a break, or.
Yeah.
No, for sure. I mean, even in both of in all 3 pieces, that we're talking about, you can see it, and I'm right there with the camera, so you can definitely see it, and you just kind of have to go with the flow, and see how things are going. But yeah, you can notice it.
Was it, this is the next question I was going to pose you. Was it weird filming like multiple people after you had just been filming, having these like partners, this group, having Pearl, which was a very specific, like the angles mattered so much? Would you speak a little bit on that?
Yeah, it really was. I mean, because up until Frank's piece, I think was the first thing that we shot with multiple dancers. Now, technically, Amaris's was with multiple people, but just her physically dancing. So when I went to the studio to watch rehearsal for the first time, it was I just remember this kind of, wow, this is great to see actual people dancing together, because it had been over a year at that, well, not quite a year, but just felt like so long. So just to see that again was a neat experience. And then to be like, okay, now I have to not only film one person, but I got to make sure I'm where I'm at, where I need to be for both people. So, and then with Erika's piece, obviously we got 4 dancers. So yeah, it was nice working one-on-one, but then it was also nice to have, people together too. So.
Was it challenging for Pearl to find angles that highlighted the dancing, but also didn't give away the
losing my light here? Hold on.
Dance.
Mood
light went out. Hold on one second. I'm sorry.
Halloween time. No, that's all right. Erika, this moves into a question I was going to ask both of you, which was about the location. So you not only had multiple people, but you were filming at the Joslin, which is a beautiful old like Art Deco building. How did the dance change from the studio rehearsal into that new space?
Yeah, well, I came up with all the steps, and we had all the little sequences. And Lance and I had talked about, I felt like the energy of the music and the piece that we wanted to, whereas some of the works, like with Frank's or another one that I did, we had a lot of these long continuous shots, which was really cool. But for this piece, we wanted a lot of different, like, change of location and a lot of fast cuts and things. So we had the dancing, and then we went on site. Lance and I went multiple times to the museum to check everything out and get some ideas. And then we went with the dancers, and for each little, section of choreography, we figured out where we thought it would look best and kind of got a little roadmap for it, so that the day when we went and did the filming, we had a plan and it all came together.
It looks really cool. It's a great building. Did anything to add on that, the nature of location filming, Lance?
No, I love being on location. That's one of my favorite things. All the films had their own specific locations, whether we were on stage or out somewhere. But I do remember Eric and I, when we first went to the Joslin to kind of scope things out, it was in the late afternoon. And we originally, I think, were planning to shoot during the daytime. And that was the plan. And we were just looking at things and looking, and we thought, boy, this is going to be really pretty at night, because we've both been in the Joslin at night. I think right there it changed and said, well, we're going to do a night shoot. And the Joslin was accommodating and letting us in, after hours. And so it's just interesting how sometimes you get someplace and you see our new ideas evolve just sometimes on the fly. So that was
absolutely. I forgot about that, Lance, but you're right. We went in and we were planning to have like a big long day of filming, and we were in there and it's like, oh, this looks like daytime. This doesn't feel right. This is a nighttime out on the town party, feeling. And so instead of starting in the morning, we started at like 8 o'clock at night because it had to be getting dark outside for the car to roll up and, be in the evening. So
wow, that's very cool. Also, that the Joslin was flexible, and choreographers flexible, dancers flexible. There's a lot of that give and take. So speaking of collaborations, not only were there multiple people collaborating in many of these pieces, but also collaborations with filmmakers, with costumers. Sandra, you spoke a little bit about the costume in your piece and how essential it was to communicate that Vermeer painting. Would you want to talk a little bit more about that process, maybe your relationship with the piece, or how you guys went back and forth to find that look?
Well, it was really Erika's mom. She just kept coming up with things, and we had that in the rehearsal room at some point just to make sure that the lines of it and stuff, and she didn't have anything pulling on her neck or anything like that. So it was just awesome to me. And then we kind of had to work with kind of how it was an empire waist, so it wouldn't show immediately baby bump. And then, having an undershirt with it. So there were some nuances there. I would just say, and that was absolutely key. I mean, she had to look just like that photo. So the first shot you got was just like, oh my God, that painting. And so I think they hit it on the nail with that. So that was key to that whole thing pulling off correctly. And then also the lighting was really nice on that, just because she's really kind of in this black space, right? And so those colors really popped in there. And I had been reading about the Vermeer painting and how they had found it, and they'd looked at the paint layers of it, and they discovered that it wasn't probably painted on something black. It was probably there's more green in like the pigment of the black that they were using.
Wow.
So I'd read that. And also I had a friend who had written a poem about that painting a long time ago, and I reminded her of it, and she sent it to me. And it was just this whole thing of how I identify with that woman. She has a knowing look in her eyes. She knows something that we don't know. And I thought, well, what she knows is I've got a child here, and how am I going to do this? So that was kind of, to me, gave me the premise as well as rereading her poem. So that's what I would say. And just a quick aside about the Joslin. I loved that piece was set there. I have many wonderful memories of growing up in Omaha and going to the Joslin and also performing there with a company of dancers from Creighton University. So, I mean, I remember it was so weird to be dancing in a museum, for your performances, but it's an awesome experience. It feels like, well, why not? I mean, look at all this art around. We're making art too. So beautiful that you guys got that collaborative thing going on with them.
Oh yeah, they're fantastic. The company has performed at the Joslin many years, and we're very grateful to have them as a collaborator partner for sure. Frank, your piece, going back to it, I loved how it really plays with this interplay of like touching, not touching, coming together, staying apart. And you spoke very eloquently about these like previous iterations that they had before. Did it spark anything doing this take on it? Do you think there's going to be another in the series? Did anything kind of generate from that?
Yeah, I mean, even though there's this common theme throughout the three works now, things always evolve. Like when I start a piece, I first and foremost need the music. Having been a musician, I'm a very musical choreographer, and that is truly my kind of springboard in most cases. But I don't always know what's going to happen once I get in the studio. So I just kind of start tossing some ideas out there, and because of the nature of this kind of reaching for each other and touching and withdrawing, I had to articulate quite a lot. So I was talking so much more than you normally would in rehearsal, because you can demonstrate with your body. But we really had to communicate verbally initially quite a lot just to kind of get it going. And they were like, okay, what is this? And then little by little, we developed an 8 count and then another phrase. And I'm like, okay, reach for his elbow. Isaac, you're going to pull away. It's supposed to look like constant movement. It's still flowing, and so it was very tedious, I would say, in terms of the beginning of it and getting it going. And then start to get into a rhythm. They start to understand what it is that my vision is in my head, which again is challenging from a wheelchair through a screen, and they're far away in the studio. They're all the way in the back of the studio. We need to start there for spacing. So there's like quite a void between myself and them and the dancers and Isaac and Jessica. And so once we got that first initial part done, the part where they really don't touch at all, which I would say was the most tedious, then we got into them doing the same steps, as in having the same experience 2 different ways, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then once we got to the partnering, it was like, oh, they were home. They were in their comfort zones, and then we flew. That part of it really flew by, and I think felt good to them. And I would say that there was also definitely a sense of excitement in that for them too, and in particular that, oh wow, this is new and this is different. I haven't done something like this. And they realized, I think, how integral a part of the process they needed to be. Their bodies were doing what my mind was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And that's...
I think it's fascinating that the rehearsal process mimicked the very theme of the piece, that there was this, if only that we could be together. There's all of this distance that you have to overcome. And then when they're finally able to partner. Yeah, Lance was speaking about the filming of If Only, and I was also there on site. And I just remember standing in the theater, seeing them embrace, and just how cathartic it was to just watch 2 people embrace. It was pretty emotional. All of these pieces, I think, have a really strong emotion, and they're all different. Like the Bee's Knees was so exciting and happy. And I was like, oh, look at people dancing together. Oh, they're having fun. Like, I haven't seen this in forever. This is great. Give me more. And Pearl was so mysterious and just so sweet once you realize what's happening. They all just evoked a lot of emotion. So I would like to just congratulate and really send along those kudos to all of you for making these beautiful pieces. Lance, were there any unexpected challenges in filming any of these 3 pieces? Anything that stands out as like, oh yeah, that was tough?
Well, they were also different. So that was part of it. And I think everybody's kind of touched on the filming process for each one was so different as well. For Pearl, obviously we wanted to hide the fact that she was pregnant. So that was a little bit challenging, but the costume was great helping there, but we shot it differently. With Frank's, the camera moved the entire time. So it was just this constant camera motion with the dancers. So that was challenging just because I had to really know the choreography and where to go and when to go. And so that was challenging. And then with Erika's, it just, when you're on location, you have to adapt, but we had it pretty mapped out. So I felt like we had a pretty good game plan, but I think there was a couple things that we kind of, let's try it or change it up a little bit. So, and that one was there was a lot of stationary shots, but then there was moments where the camera was moving. And so it was just kind of adapting to that location. So, and having 4 people instead of 1 or 2.
Gotta fit them all in the frame. Oh no.
I'll say for my duet, for If Only, Lance, we tested how good a shape he was in, because he did a lot of running around that stage. He had like, move, haul, get going.
Yeah.
A little backstage peek. Erika was also present during filming, and she shadowed behind Lance to make sure he didn't fall off the stage as he was moving. So it was like the dancers, and then Lance with his camera, and then Erika just stage.
I was the buddy behind him the whole time. Yeah.
Our artistic director always has our back, literally.
Yeah, literally.
Well, that kind of leads into a question I wanted to ask you guys as choreographers, not just of these specific pieces, but in general, which is, how was it working for film? So I understand you all normally do more theater live pieces, right? Had you worked much on film before? Did you find that it was exciting to be able to take multiple takes, or was that frustrating because you were like, oh, then I can get it perfect. Oh, the perfect take.
I think it was weird because I was on Zoom watching you guys film it. So I didn't know what you were looking at in the frame at all, until I saw the finished product. And so, yeah, I mean, I knew that, like, oh, this part needs to zoom in, this part's going to zoom out. We want to maybe get this angle from it. And then, get sometimes where it's, above the waist. And and I couldn't see things like at some points, her skirt's going up on these turns so we can see the baby bump underneath, So those are things that, Erika had to be, and Lance had to kind of be cognizant of. So it was just odd not being in the room, on the stage for me. I mean, it wasn't so much, it was just trusting that the camera was finding the angles that we talked about, So, and did a beautiful job with it, really. So.
Trust, absolutely. Frank or Erika?
Go ahead, Erika.
You were asking the difference of performing on stage versus for film. Well, yeah, I mean, it let us do, and throughout with all of these pieces, do stuff that's completely different in some ways than we would be able to do. Usually your audience is stationary during a dance performance. They're looking at it from one, perspective, but in this piece, we were able to make the audience move, like in my piece and in Frank's piece. And, so that's a whole nother element that's interesting. It just opens up a lot of different opportunities you know, we love live theater because there's that connection, that in the moment and all of the people experiencing it together. And so that's just a fabulous thing about performing live. But it did allow us to do things and show, I guess, to show some of the really up close stuff. I really like that about the filming process, because a lot of times in the theater, you are more physically removed. But here we were able to get in really close for, like in Frank's piece, some of the intimate moments, or, you know, it just lets people see another perspective of dance, which I think is great.
Mm-hmm.
I love filming dance. I've had been fortunate and have been able to do it a few times, you know, throughout my career. And I think, as Erika said, you know, you're able to bring the audience in a little bit closer, which generally they are physically farther away. I think that the biggest challenge for me is like when you're seeing theater live, seeing dance live, there is that exchange of energy. And then you're one big step, even I think even farther removed when you're doing it through a lens. So it's trying to create that experience and provide the energy on film that you experience live is, I think, the biggest challenge. And again, doing that with getting in close, as Erika was saying, and finding ways to make it as exhilarating as a live performance, I think is the biggest challenge. But it's fun. I love getting to do it, and it is film. You know, you want to get that perfect take. Can be a blessing and a curse, you know, and more often than not, even with photo shoots, it's like, oh, that first one was it. Then you try to recreate it, see if you can get the dress better flying, or this, or the hand, or the finger. And it's like that first one was the one, you know, and we went through that a little bit. We were a particularly technical little moment in the piece, and we tried it over and over. The dancers were giving it their all, and it's like, okay, we have to have it in there somewhere in the 9 takes that we've already shot. You know, I'm like, Lance, this is where you create the magic, because sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. And there's 1 out of 10 maybe that actually worked, you know. And so you keep trying, and it's like, okay, we've got it in there somewhere, and you just have to trust. And I was able to trust Lance, and and again, the dancers in the end got it, but we did create a little bit of magic to make it that much better.
Mm-hmm. The blessing and the curse, absolutely.
Right.
Yes. Erika, you've worked on many projects, obviously, for the whole Going Solo series. Do you feel more comfortable now with film as a medium, or are you like, wow, there's so much, it's just an endless well?
I do. I feel like Lance and I have talked about this. We've learned so much, just even at the beginning of this process, just things that we picked up and learned along the way. I mean, and I guess that's life. Hopefully you continue to learn something from everything you do, but yeah. So, I mean, I'm sure there's always more to learn, but I think it did give the dancers not only the opportunity, you know, to choreograph, but all of us a chance to make dance for film, and, you know, a great new skill that we all got to explore.
Yes, absolutely. And trust, collaboration, partnership, these are fabulous themes, and I'm hearing them a lot as we wrap up the Going Solo series for this season. And what amazing collaborators and choreographers to speak to for our final dance chat. Before we leave the Zoom, did anybody have any stories or anecdotes about their piece or the filming that they haven't gotten to share yet and they wanted to?
Kudos to Lance. I have to I mean, that's a lot of filming. And if you don't know dance by now, Lance, hang it up, you know? But I mean, yeah, he did I think a really remarkable job, and there was so much that was asked of him from so many different people and in so many different situations and locations. And he came into the rehearsal studio lots of times, and we filmed several times in the studio, and then we took it to the stage, and then he also did the editing and everything. So phenomenal job to Lance, for the entire series, really.
Thanks, Frank.
Sure.
I was just going to mention also, like, the music that we used for Pearl was this Mondonville Sonata, and these musicians were actually performing it in the Louvre. They're the musicians of the Louvre, which I thought was so perfect for the fact that this, this painting, I'm not sure it's in the Louvre, but certainly his paintings are somewhere.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a sweet moment to realize that kind of seemed like that was, because I did actually have a couple of choices of music. And that one just is like, yeah, you know what? Everything about that says this time period. And so that was kind of a magic piece too for me.
Mm-hmm.
I will
On
just
top of the
say-
fact that Pearl is like the pearl of great price. I wanted to say that, like the thing that's really most important is that little pearl inside of her and not this pearl earring.
Right.
So, that was also kind of a nice little thing that happened.
It's like an Easter egg. It's like the whole dance piece becomes a metaphor for the girl with the pearl. I just thought it was masterfully done.
Love
Erika,
it.
were you going to say something?
Oh yeah. Oh well, but then Sandra was talking about her pearl of great price, and really being the child. That's the little special, valuable thing inside, and I thought that was beautiful. Kind of gives me goosebumps there.
Yeah.
But I was going to say that a thing that was so fun about going solo for me too was working with these guest choreographers, Frank, Sandra, and several others. It was just really neat and brought a whole nother energy to it. And I just love that people that I connected with and reached out to were so eager and open and had really brilliant ideas, but everyone's ideas were different. And so it was great through this series, not only to, for many of the dancers to get to choreograph. Some of them, that was their first major opportunity to choreograph, but also to get to work with these amazing guests from different locations, all throughout the country. But it sort of brought us all together. And, I'm really glad that we made something of this time that we had.
Yeah, your unique perspectives were invaluable, and all of the guest choreographers added just this fabulous uniqueness to all the pieces. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you folks watching at home for joining us today to talk about dance and film and all the fun stuff in between. Before we sign off, Sandra and Frank, do you have any projects you're working on right now that you'd like to talk about? Or plug, as we say in the business?
Thanks to the magic of Zoom, which is something that now makes it so possible. I'm actually working right now with the University of Arizona, the dance department there, and we're setting habaneras, the music of Cuba there. And I have there's a woman who's on faculty who is a graduate and was also in River North, my company, for 6 or 7 years. And then also a guy who is, she's on faculty after going back to school and getting her master's. And then there's another former dancer, a gentleman, who's back there getting his master's. So, and they both danced this piece quite a lot since it was our closer and we used it quite a lot. And so they're there staging it. And we're doing 2 casts, and they're actually rebuilding the costumes from scratch, which is just phenomenal. Yeah, these costumes were quite the project and quite expensive. So it's really been great. And again, it's like Zoom allows me to be sitting here in Florida, working with, 30 some odd dancers in Tucson, Arizona. And we'll be doing that. We basically just cast it. Now we'll resume rehearsals now in January, and the performances will be at the end of April, early May, 2 casts. So very fun.
That's
Thanks to Zoom.
fantastic. Yeah, thank you, Zoom.
Right?
They don't sponsor us.
It's a whole new world.
Yeah, isn't it? Similarly, I've been working with a dancer who works with the Urban Bushwomen, who is from Houston and had done a piece about her grandmother who was losing her memory. And the first installment of it was called Memory Keeper. And so she had, just stories of her grandmother, and she was dancing to that text and that narrative. And then she's gotten a grant to expand that, and she wanted to expand it, the voices. And my grandmother also grew up in Houston. And so we are been exchanging recipes, and that's across the Zoom rehearsals. We would just bring our recipes in, and we talked about our recipes, and then we take just hints from that, and just start constructing the movement from these recipes.
That's
Which is a
awesome.
really weird process. And I, initially when I said to her, you want me to come in on this as a collaborator, or you want me to make movement for you? She said, I want you to make movement for you and you'll perform it. And I thought, I am 58 years old. What are you talking about me performing this thing? And so I'm like, no, now I'm kind of hauled into it, but that's fine. I think that actually, it's kind of nice to see a mature mover out there, but,
Absolutely.
anyway, so that's one project I'm working on, and I'm going to go and work with her in person for the first time in a few weeks in Houston. And then I'm going to stage a ballet with a regional company in Houston while I'm there as well. So I haven't decided what I'm going to do with that one yet. That's a company I've come back to many times. I probably choreographed more ballets for that little company, and they keep producing really good dancers. And so I'm excited to do that in December. And my dog is starting to bark outside.
There you go.
That's why I've muted my.
He's excited too. He's like, yes, Sandra, get moving.
And I've been working the last 3 weeks on a little known ballet called The Nutcracker.
Oh,
So,
geez.
yes, it's
What
back.
a great name.
It's back. Yes.
Yes. And tickets are on sale now. So if you are in the
Yeah.
Omaha metropolitan area and you would like to see American Midwest Ballet's Nutcracker, please visit our website at amballet.org and see the Christmas classic that, I'll say it, we're actually very grateful to be back doing it. You know that you're grateful when you're like, oh, the Nutcracker. Yes. It'll make you appreciate everything. And boy, howdy, it's going to be beautiful. And we so appreciate you all and your time. So thank you again one last time for joining us. And we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.